no worse feeling than messing up on your first day on the job. After all, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. I remember my first day working at the cracker factory and how mortified I was when I walked into a meeting of the board directors, spilled my briefcase full of spaghetti, and accidentally set the fire alarm and sprinklers off. It was a disaster, and though they were kind enough to refill my briefcase, I never got over the humiliation of it all. The same fate, well, not exactly the same, has befallen many WWE superstars who worked their whole lives to make it to Vince McMahon's pro wrestling promised land, only to fall flat on their face at the very first hurdle, their WWE debut. A bad debut can be hard to shake, as it can instantly signal to the audience that you are an absolute loser, giving you a real uphill battle to try and get over. Or, and perhaps much worse, it can lead to management to lose faith in you and your ability to perform right from the get-go. In a perfect world, every WWE superstar would have a dream debut, a flawless first outing where the crowd responds as you want them to and nothing goes the way it shouldn't. But this isn't a perfect world. This is a nightmare, at least for the following 10 WWE stars who, for one reason or another, had an introduction to forget. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic.com, and these are 10 disastrous WWE debuts. Join us! Number 10, Sami Zayn. Sami Zayn's official main roster WWE debut sounds just about perfect, at least on paper. Introduced by WWE Hall of Famer and living legend Bret Hart on Monday Night Raw in his home province of Quebec as the surprise opponent of United States champion John Cena for his May 4th, 2015 US title Open Challenge. Entering to a thunderous ovation, Zayn looked like an instant superstar as he rolled into the arena, feeding off of the energy of the crowd and gesticulating wildly. Unfortunately, it was while getting some of that energy out of his system during his entrance that Zayn blew out his shoulder. Ouch. Yes, the underdog from the underground had to wrestle the biggest match of his career with a torn rotator cuff, a painful injury that would inevitably require a long layoff. But Zayn didn't know the severity at the time, and adrenaline is a hell of a thing. Though in considerable pain and with the doctor threatening to stop the action early on, he gutted it out and put on a hell of a performance in his match with Big Match John. You certainly can't knock the effort, but the injury definitely blighted the contest and delayed Sami's main roster plans, making him sit out most of the rest of the year. Number 9, Fantasio. Harry Del Rios, no relation to former WWE superstar and all-round awful person Alberto Del Rio, was a star in Memphis wrestling in the early 90s as the Spellbinder. He had a good size and look and had enough seasoning from working with the Jerry Lawlers of the world that WWE, who had him signed to a developmental deal, gave him a shot on television based on the recommendation of the King. Ditching the Spellbinder character for Fantasio, Del Rios was going to be a wrestling magician. An interesting concept in theory, perhaps, it was a laughable disaster in execution. In his one and only televised match, Fantasio defeated veteran jobber Tony DeVito on the July 16, 1995 episode of Superstars, impressing no one during the 2 minutes he was out there lumbering around and performing lame tricks. The act was more suited to a child's party than a wrestling ring, even if WWE in 1995 was sort of like one seemingly never-ending version of 7-year-old little Timmy's nightmarish birthday bash. Fantasio won the bout by, you guessed it, removing his opponent's underwear, and then promptly did the same to referee Earl Hebner. A sad display all round, Fantasio wasn't used on television after that, but did make a few house show appearances, during one of which he almost burned down the backstage area while faffing on with a bottle of lighter fluid. Number 8, Sin Cara. The original Sin Cara, who wrestled as Mystico in Mexico, came into WWE in 2011 with a lot of hype thanks to his years of dazzling displays south of the border as one of the country's premier luchadors. Bypassing developmental and going straight to the main roster, Sin Cara debuted on the post-WrestleMania 27 Raw, attacking Sheamus, who was giving Daniel Bryan a beatdown after their match. Things got off to a ropey start, with Sin Cara not clearing the top rope on his trampoline-assisted entrance, a harbinger of things to come. The next week was his debut proper, as he took on Primo, a worker of similar size and style who had wrestled the Masked Man on previous house shows. He once again fluffed up his big entrance, and while the match was alright and he hit a few stunning Adam Pacitti-esque high-flying moves, he also screwed up the finish, falling off the top rope when he was supposed to hit a one-man Spanish fly as Lawler and Cole snickered on commentary. He then just wandered back into the ring and hit the move right, but the damage was done and Cara was already getting a reputation for clumsiness, a reputation he did his absolute best to prove was justified during his jittery WWE stay. Number 7. Chris Masters. A Vince McMahon wet dream come to life, Chris Masters had just about everything going for him when he made his televised debut on the February 21st, 2005 episode of Raw. He was muscular, he was in shape, he had big arms and a big back and big beautiful pecs, his legs were vascular and strong as an oak tree. Those abs were... where was I going with this? Oh yeah, his televised debut match. After weeks of hype videos, the masterpiece made his bow with an extravagant entrance, ready and willing to punish Steven Richards, who, let's face it, never stood a chance. As a match, it was short and nothing special, just a way to introduce Masters and have him show off some of his power before putting the tomato can away with the Master Lock. Routine stuff, but just before the finish, something went terribly wrong, as an overzealous Masters blasted Richards in the face with excessive force, breaking the veteran's nose and orbital bone. Masters has since stated that his sloppy performance was the result of food poisoning he contracted after eating a turkey sandwich at a dodgy gas station. Though it didn't derail his early push too much, it wasn't the ideal start for a young and unproven, jacked up kid who already had a target on his big, beautiful, muscular back. Number 6. Avatar. Another winner from the cursed year that was 1995, Avatar was WWE's weak attempt to cash in on the popularity of the Power Rangers with a little bit of legendary Japanese cruiserweight Hayabusa sprinkled in for good measure. Avatar was played by journeyman Al Snow, fresh off some standout performances in ECW and Smoky Mountain Wrestling, and a favourite of WWE booking committee member Jim Cornette. The character made its debut on Raw in a squash match with Brian Walsh, the designated jobber who came out of the match looking considerably more impressive than the man he was supposed to be helping to get over. Snow made his entrance without a mask and then put it on for the match, as you do, and the hood was clearly a distraction as he botched several moves, including a springboard dive to the floor, and spent a great deal of time fidgeting with it. The timing was all wrong, the crowd didn't care, and to make matters worse, Vince McMahon himself, the man who had come up with the gimmick, was calling the awful action from ringside. After winning the match with a feeble standing splash that would make the Ultimate Warrior roll over in his grave, Avatar removed the mask to reveal a face that said, "That was crap, and this character is probably not long for the scrap heap." And so it was. Number 5, Eddie Guerrero. Eddie Guerrero now, and proof that even the greatest performers can run into bad luck on the big occasion. Guerrero jumped to WWE from WCW with his running buddies Chris Benoit, Dean Malenko, and Perry Saturn, forming the Radicals and making an immediate impact in the company by hopping the barricade and attacking Road Dogg and Billy Gunn, complete with Eddie Guerrero delivering a beautiful frog splash on Mr. Ass. It was doing that same move in his debut match with the New Age Outlaws a few nights later on SmackDown, a move that he had performed hundreds of times prior, that Latino Heat dislocated his elbow, necessitating the match finish be changed on the fly to the Outlaws going over. Not only was that not the planned finish, but it also killed off the storyline running through the show of the Radicals needing to win a best-of-3 series of matches with DX members in order to earn a WWE contract. In pain and worried that he'd blown it in his first proper match with the company, Eddie was despondent as he waited in a Detroit hospital for medical staff to fix him up. Thankfully, this was only a stumbling block, and when he returned to work, Eddie thrived, quickly reinventing himself thanks to his winning allegiance with China. The unfortunate injury was then a distant memory. Number 4, Tensai. Matt Bloom had a couple of prior shots at WWE stardom and did well enough as Prince Albert and A-Train before receiving his release in 2004. Reinventing himself in Japan as Giant Bernard, Bloom worked hard in the following 6 or 7 years and convinced WWE that he was worth investing in once more. This time he would be coming in strong as a brand new character inspired by his time as a top star in Japan. Vignettes pronounced the impending arrival of Lord Tensai, a tattooed warrior who was flanked by his follower, Sakamoto. Debuting on the post-WrestleMania 28 episode of Raw, Tensai went one-on-one with Alex Riley, dominating the contest to the point where the referee felt the need to stop it. Impressive, no? Well, it actually wasn't, because fans were alternatively bored by the deliberate display and entertained themselves by chanting the names of Bloom's former monikers, as well as Daniel, Bryan, boring, and you suck. Turns out, if you put Test's old tag team partner in some red trunks and give him stock Japanese-sounding entrance music number 34, people aren't going to be bowled over. Tensai's push persisted for a short while, including a memorable victory over John Cena, but the gimmick was DOA, and a comedic reboot and pairing with Brodus Clay proved to be an unlikely saving grace. Number 3, the gobbledygooker. When a film is a spectacular failure at the box office and with the critics, it's often called a turkey. Speaking of which, that brings us to number 3, the gobbledygooker. What made the gobbledygooker even more terrible was the level of hype that went behind it. For weeks, yes, actual weeks, announcers, interviewers, and even wrestlers speculated what could possibly be in that giant egg in the run-up to the 1990 Survivor Series. Was it a world champion from a rival promotion, or the Playmate of the Month as Gene Okerlund had hoped for? No, it was Hector Guerrero, brother of Eddie, dressed like Thanksgiving dinner. The crowd in Hartford hated it and let their displeasure be known, raining down boos as Gooker and Mean Gene bombed, with Roddy Piper and Gorilla Monsoon doing their tragic best to sell it as something other than a colossal failure on commentary. Off to the slaughterhouse, bird boy. Number 2, Edge. According to the man himself during an interview with our pal Kenny McIntosh, hello, Edge felt like a bag of prison arse immediately following his in-ring WWE debut. The not yet rated R superstar had been built up through a series of vignettes that saw him brooding around New York in a trench coat, looking cool and mysterious and randomly attacking passers-by for no conceivable reason. They didn't make much sense, but if the company was bothering to go out and film stuff and spend money on promoting your impending arrival, odds are that they thought you had a pretty good shot of becoming a star. After all the hype, Edge made his debut on the June 22nd, 1998 episode of Raw in a match with former Los Boricuas member Jose Estrada Jr. 30 seconds in, and after hitting a solitary spear, Edge went for a somersault dive over the top rope to the floor, and after nailing it, his opponent couldn't get up. Edge won the match by countout, but boy did he not look happy after the bell, a mixture of real-life frustration and the character's confused angst. Contrary to urban legend, Estrada thankfully didn't suffer a broken neck that night. Thankfully, he just had several pinched nerves and was back to bumping sooner rather than later. And by the way, Edge, to his credit, did call Estrada every week that he was out of action to check up on him. What a guy. Number 1, Buff Bagwell. Buff Bagwell, WWE main eventer. It sounds farcical, but it actually happened. Once. In the early days of the WCW invasion of WWE, the brain trust at Titan Sports were actually considering turning Raw into WCW Nitro as a way to keep the formerly Turner-owned brand alive, building them up as competition for an eventual inter-promotion rivalry. As part of this experiment, WWE had the main event of the July 2nd, 2001 Raw be an all-WCW affair, a WCW title match pitting 5-time champion Booker T against Buff Bagwell, complete with WCW referee, announcers, and graphics. Fans in Tacoma, Washington, who had no doubt turned up expecting to see Steve Austin, Kurt Angle and the boys closing the show, completely turned on the action, which fell way below the usual expected standard of quality, thanks in large part to the Buff Boys' uninspired performance. The crowd finally woke up when the WWE lads came in to clean house, but the WCW revival was already toast. WWE quickly changed course, immediately presenting WCW and then ECW as invading forces rather than separate brands with their own shows, hotshotting the invasion by many months. Bagwell would exit WWE within the week, his rotten work here not helped by him fighting with Shane Helms or, allegedly, his mummy calling up the office to complain on her son's behalf.